Welcome to Junction City, affectionately known as the mile-long truck stop, a place whose primary export appears to be exclusion and RV parks. The locals call it charming, they call it quaint, they call it good for raising kids, though that usually comes right before the part they admit they have to drive 30 minutes to access any actual services. If it sounds contradictory, don't worry, contradiction is probably somewhere in the town charter, that, and designing the built environment like a test of natural selection. If you can't drive, the town regards you like an evolutionary dead end, a design flaw. At least with truck stops you can reliably find accessible restrooms, ramps, and water that won't make the EPA start investigating. Here, accessibility feels more like something you read about elsewhere. A concept that maybe exists in larger municipalities with big budgets and empathy. Junction City is petite in the way a pufferfish is petite, deceptively cute until it's aggressively unwelcoming. The town is small enough that you'd imagine you could walk everywhere. That's the trap. That's the snare that the city sets for you. Junction City is small geographically, but spiritually it's an interstate. It wants you in a vehicle at all times, preferably a large one, preferably something that belches diesel and asserts dominance over children at crosswalks. If you don't, or can't drive, the town regards you not as a citizen, but as an inconvenient variable, something one would skip, say if they flunked high school math, something the infrastructure doesn't include when solving for X. The principles of universal design, equitable use, tolerance for error, flexibility, those are treated like fan fiction here. The kind of idealistic yarn you might expect from utopian architects or people who haven't had their souls sanded down by municipal budget meetings. Originally, I wanted to go through each of the 7 principles of universal design as a neat, bullet-pointed analysis. You know, principle, example, critique, suggestion, a satisfying, well-behaved argument. But Junction City is fundamentally incompatible with organization. You try to apply Principle 1, equitable use, and the town coughs up a sidewalk that ends in a ditch. You try Principle 2, flexibility in use, and you get a doorway that requires upper body strength the average person hasn't had since swinging from trees in childhood. Before you can even get to Principle 3, simple and intuitive use, the town presents you with a pedestrian crossing that appears to operate entirely in its own dimension. Universal design assumes a good faith effort to include people. Junction City assumes nothing of the sort. So maybe we start by naming what the city does have. Naming the system operating underneath the missing ramps, the jagged sidewalks, the inaccessible parks, and the just drive mentality. Maybe we start with the driving force you don't notice until you do. The ideological scaffolding of a place like this. Ableism. And once you see it, you get the uncanny feeling the entire town was designed using it as a blueprint. The quiet infrastructure of assumption, the background noise people stop hearing after childhood, the idea that ability is default, disability a glitch. In academic terms, ableism refers to the ideological hypervaluation of ableness and the ways in which such forms of abled and disabled identity are given force in law, social policy, and cultural values. Such norms shape and are shaped by claims about the impaired, non-able body's legitimacy or fraudulency. Ableism denotes the ideology of a healthy body, a normal mind, appropriate speed of thought, and acceptable expressions of emotion. Key to a system of ableism are 2 elements: the concept of the normative and normal individual, and the enforcement of a divide between a perfected or developed humanity and the aberrant, unthinkable, underdeveloped, and therefore not really human. In lay terms, if the environment consistently treats disabled people as an afterthought, it's not an accident, it's a value system. It's a quiet declaration that some bodies matter and others are inconvenient. And if you're paying attention, this declaration is painted everywhere on Junction City's landscape in colors ranging from mild annoyance to unmistakable hostility. We won't walk down the highway today, even able-bodied. This is the gym where mortality goes to work out. Fast cars, erratic drivers, intersections engineered by someone who thought tolerance for error meant, meh. It's just a string of convenience stores and drive-thrus anyway. A food swamp that must be crossed to gain access to the grocery outlet, bargain market. Downtown Junction City looks like it was built by someone who loved the Main Street USA vibe, but hated the people who live there. There are active train tracks with no lights, signals, or sensory cues. If you have impaired vision or hearing differences, the town basically tells you to rely on instinct, hope, and your ability to outrun a locomotive. Perceptible information, not here. Perceptible information is moved to a city that cares. The trains do blare their horns as they pass through residential neighborhoods at all hours of the day and night, so I guess that's good, unless you have a sleep disorder. The storefronts offer that curated rustic charm, a folksy facade that suggests 1950s life. But post-war life didn't have ADA-compliant entrances. Here, you get heavy doors that require the strength of a prospective Olympian, especially after the winter swell of moisture turns every hinge into a fully oppositional force. Two-story buildings don't have elevators because, apparently, vertical access is either a moral pest or meant to build character. Its accessibility as Darwin imagined it. Community Center, by contrast, was recently remodeled. You'd imagine, those of you who are thoughtful, hopeful, and misguided like me, that a remodel might include new accessible entrances, or updated equipment and activities, or anything beyond cosmetic improvements. But the city spent its money on beautification, not functionality, as if aesthetics is the thing that makes a space usable. The door is a literal gatekeeping device, an obstacle disguised as civic charm. Why modernize when the entire building can function like a low-key bouncer? The police department does have an automatic door button, for equitable payment of fines presumably. Somehow, accessibility always shows up when revenue is involved. Again, this is architecture of values, not engineering. Another set of train tracks, no sidewalks, a dramatic elevation shift that looks like a video game crashing mid-render. If you need anything from Weimar, better learn to fly. My favorite purgatorial intersection, an uncontrolled four-way crossing with a hedge so tall it's applying for natural wonder status. If you're in a wheelchair, this is less an intersection and more a pop-up NASCAR track. Meanwhile, the lifted truck barreling towards you is a cultural artifact, a monument to big truck sprawl, ideas, engineering, and in first-world countries, worshipped here like an aluminum golden calf. Cross the highway if you dare, if you're an adrenaline junkie. Here, the sidewalks shift from quirky to conceptual art. You can almost imagine a municipal planner standing there with a clipboard thinking, what if the sidewalk just ended? And everyone else nodding along solemnly as if this was groundbreaking work. What's most obvious in this area are large sections of sidewalk that have been driven up into jagged, impassable trunks. This one is probably 2 feet above the elevation of the sidewalk. I'm sure it just happened though, and someone will be along shortly to fix it. Why am I laying so hard in the sidewalks? For one, this is just terrible design that ignores the existence of anyone in the community who isn't fully able-bodied. And small towns don't have to do much. Is it a lot to ask for usable sidewalks since you're charging us for them? On parks that are accessible to everyone? We'll get to that. Otherwise, what else are we expecting? Clean water? Well, if you've heard one thing about Junction City, it's that we're fast on our way to being the next Flint, Michigan. But let's stay focused on public space design. The sidewalks people do have, buried under RVs, boats, or homemade planters acting as mock Viking funerary monuments. A reminder, the sidewalk is not your driveway, no matter how many beers you share with city officials at the Moose Lodge or what sheriff's department you work for. Look, these people can do it. Telephone poles erupt from the center of pathways. Universal Design Principle 7, size and space for approach and use, is somewhere screaming into a pillow. It's not even subtle. It's a buffet of barriers. A sidewalk here is less a passage and more a dare, a puzzle, a riddle with only one answer. Why aren't you driving? The thing about inaccessible design is that it's exponential. It compounds. A single missing ramp becomes a block you can't traverse. 5 blocks become a neighborhood. A neighborhood becomes a city where mobility is only possible through the sanctioned vehicular method. Disability studies calls this infrastructural exclusion, but Junction City calls it a planning department. Before I let go of the whole sidewalk obsession, let me show you another favorite. Again, on one of the main thoroughfares. We can head down the sidewalk and, oops, it ends. But what's that across the street? Another sidewalk. I guess we'll dodge some traffic to get over there. Using a stroller? I hope your baby isn't practicing their Tony Hawk moves for this intersection. And whoops, the sidewalk ends again. But there it is, across the street. Schrödinger sidewalk. Let's have a look at some of our city parks. For a city with so few residents, we sure have a lot of parks. About 1 for every 500 people. But unless you're an able-bodied child, they don't have much use. You'd think parks, supposedly public, supposedly communal, supposedly designed for enjoyment, would be the exception, but Junction City's parks are little zones of reinforcement of normalcy. Places for able-bodied children, supervised by able-bodied parents, accessed by able-bodied beings. The play structures are regularly replaced, shiny injections of taxpayer dollars that don't address the gaps in access. One park has an actual path, a miracle, an anomaly, a cosmic clerical error, but most are small lawns, grassy mobility device traps, mud in winter, unmowed in summer, inaccessible year-round. Are there nature trails or activities that everyone can enjoy? Nope. And don't expect to take your dog to play here, or train your service dog. The local police are deeply committed to maintaining the sanctity of the grass, even if the rest of the infrastructure is falling apart. They enforce leash laws like doctrine, as if ensuring an inaccessible park remains inaccessible is somehow public safety. Don't expect the dog park anytime soon. We must enforce Christian values with more playgrounds. The rest of the green space in town is monopolized and fenced in by schools and churches like rare animals at a zoo nobody is allowed to visit. If the five-man electrical band wrote a song here, it would be No Signs, because everything's already fenced. Universal Design Principle 1, Equitable Use, dies quietly in a drainage ditch. The arts and culture scene in town is remarkably consistent. Two bar bands competing loudly from across the highway, battling for custody over a set list nobody wants. Mustang Sally cries out for help. If you want communal events, high school football reigns supreme. If you can't climb the bleacher steps, you can theoretically bring your own chair and sit in the rain, provided you manage to cross the gravel lots without spraining something. Mobility devices fare about as well as shopping carts on an unpaved road. The message is clear. Culture is for people who can physically get to it. Everyone else is invited to watch a live stream, if there were one, and pretend that exclusion is just how small towns work. But exclusion is never neutral. Social exile conveys another message about expectations. Many stigmatized people are not encouraged to develop or grow, have aspirations or be successful. Children with cancer lose friendships and receive special lenient treatment from teachers. They are not expected to achieve in the same manner as other children. Social exclusion as well as overprotection can lead to decreased performance. Lower expectations also lead to decreased self-esteem. This is the ideological core of inaccessible design. The environment doesn't just ignore you, it shapes the expectations that others have for you. It destroys expectations you have for yourself. Universal design is the antidote, but Junction City hasn't filled its prescription. When a city designs itself for only one kind of body, it constructs a hierarchy, a physical one, a moral one, an economic one. Accessibility isn't merely about ramps or curb cuts, it's about participation. It's about symbolic inclusion that becomes real inclusion. It's about whether people feel they belong in the place where they live. Junction City's choices reveal its priorities, and they aren't subtle. Cars over pedestrians, aesthetics over function, able-bodied access over universal access, and maintenance and the status quo instead of change that benefits everyone. Universal design isn't a fairy tale. It's not utopian. It's practical. It's cost-effective in the long run. It's humane. It's literally the minimum standard for a community that claims to value its members. When the infrastructure says you don't belong, people internalize it. When buildings are hostile, people stop approaching. Accessibility is not just a physical condition, it's a psychological invitation, a social permission slip. Junction City tears those permission slips in half. The tourism slogan could be, "Come to Junction City, if you're able." Or, and here's the part where the humanity and empathy in me steps forward, we can choose to view this place not as a failure, but as an opportunity, a before picture. A case study, a chance for citizens to tell their representatives that improvements must include everyone, not just the loudest or most able-bodied constituents. Universal design is not a niche concept, it's a human one. And until Junction City learns that, the rest of us will continue identifying what it pretends not to see.